Hello, everybody. I'd like to begin by thanking the European Rim Policy and Investment Council and its staff for kindly extending an invitation to me to say a few words today by form of a commentary recorded on video. I've entitled the commentary as follows: The Fall of Famagusta, a commentary to mark the 450th anniversary of the Ottoman Turkish conquest of Famagusta in August 1571, and the 47th anniversary of the Turkish occupation of the city in August 1974. The reason why the invitation was extended to me was because on the 20th of July 2021, on the 47th anniversary of the first of the two Turkish invasions of the Republic of Cyprus, President Erdogan paid a visit to the Turkish-occupied north of the Republic of Cyprus, and he oversaw the initiation of a new phase in the history of that occupied city of Famagusta. Not that he calls it occupied. In fact, Turkey doesn't regard itself as the occupying power in the north of the Republic of Cyprus. And that's one of the problems. In fact, it's the core of the problem that confronts the Republic of Cyprus, the European Union of which it forms part, and the wider democratic world. Those three interlinked entities, the Republic of Cyprus, the European Union, and the wider democratic world, are locked in a geopolitical struggle with Turkey over the destiny of the post-1945 legal order. That order has already been trashed by Turkey and by certain other international actors. And it's almost on a life support machine as a result of one violation after another by one state after another. And Famagusta, in a sense, symbolizes what has gone wrong with the post-1945 legal order. It's not being respected as widely as it should. It's not being upheld by those in whose hands the protection of that order has fallen. And perhaps most worryingly of all, this failure to uphold the rule of law on the global stage threatens real people in places such as the Republic of Cyprus. So what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is look at what has happened in the Turkish-occupied north of the Republic of Cyprus, and more specifically in Famagusta, on the 20th of July 2021, and then go back into history to trace some of the background issues and realities that the international media has tended to either ignore altogether or gloss over in its coverage of what happened. I'm going to take you to the nearest thing that we have to an authoritative primary source in the English language, at least, and that is the official statement, or one of the official statements that was issued by the presidency of Turkey after President Erdogan had visited the Turkish-occupied north of the Republic of Cyprus on the 20th of July 2021. He actually arrived a day earlier, but this statement was issued on the anniversary of the Turkish invasion, the first Turkish invasion of 20th of July 1974. I'll read to you what the statement says. It's taken from the official website of the Turkish presidency. Speaking at the so-called, my word, so-called, July 20th Peace and Freedom Day ceremony in the so-called, I must say, and illegal TRNC, President Erdogan said the following: "In the light of the works carried out by respecting the property rights, a new era in which everyone will benefit will begin in Maras," which is the Turkish word for Varosha, which is a term that I'm going to look at in my presentation. It's essentially a vague term that's used to describe a southern suburb of the city of Famagusta. So President Erdogan said, in the light of works carried out by respecting the property rights, he claimed, a new era in which everyone will benefit will begin in Maras, otherwise known as Varosha, from now on. the fact that the opening will first occur in a pilot area, which corresponds to the 3.5% of the closed part of Marash, as he calls it, shows how sensitive the Turkish Cypriot officials handle this issue. What does that mean? In simple terms, what it means is that until now, the Turkish occupation authorities in the north of the Republic of Cyprus have been administering a so-called closed portion of Famagusta, fenced off part of Famagusta. And now that closed off part, or a part of that closed off part, is going to be opened for development. And the development, it would appear, is going to be placed into the hands of what President Erdogan has called the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus. But in reality is the illegal and internationally unrecognized subordinate local administration of Turkey in the Turkish-occupied the Republic of Cyprus. And from this wording, we see the crux of the problem. The crux of the problem is that Turkey does not accept that it is an occupying power. It doesn't accept that it has responsibilities as an occupying power. And it is determined to exploit territory that doesn't belong to it as part of a much wider Turkish agenda that some people might call Ottoman and other people might call neo-colonial. The net effect is the same. Turkey is in unlawful occupation of a city and an occupied area more broadly, and is seeking to exploit the territory under its occupation. Now, on the 20th of July, President Erdogan said a few other things. I'll just read to you some of those things. He's claimed the so-called Marash region, which has for centuries been inactive, will be the symbol of the peaceful and prosperous future of the Cyprus island, not of the deadlock. So he doesn't recognize the Republic of Cyprus, so he's used the phrase the Cyprus island, which is a euphemism, meaningless phrase to all intents and purposes, but what it demonstrates is the non-recognition that Turkey has of the Republic of Cyprus, even though the Republic of Cyprus is the only internationally recognized sovereign state on the island of Cyprus. And he goes on to engage in rhetoric. What he also did on the 20th of July, and this caught my eye, was that President Erdogan laid bare the essence of Turkish segregationist doctrine. I call it Turkish segregationist doctrine. The media doesn't, by and large, but that's essentially what it is. The democracy rests on one people in the singular. Turkey has been consistently advancing the argument that there is not one people in the Republic of Cyprus. In fact, they don't recognize the Republic of Cyprus. Turkey argues that there are two peoples in the plural in the island of Cyprus. So on that day, the 20th of July, President Erdogan said that, the statement of President Erdogan said, underscoring that without acknowledging that there were two peoples and two states of equal status, but of different religions, languages, and cultures in Cyprus, no progress would be made in negotiations. President Erdogan noted that it was now an obligation rather than a choice to reach a resolution based on these facts. Thus, with the timely and efficient steps, the games have been foiled and the mold has been broke with regard to the Cyprus issue. So his attempt to open up the so-called closed part of occupied Famagusta forms part of this much wider Turkish agenda, which seeks to promote the claim that there are two peoples in the island of Cyprus, and that each of those two peoples has its own separate sovereign state. Now, the so-called international community doesn't recognize that reality because the Republic of Cyprus remains the sole legitimate international entity in the island of Cyprus. But having said that, the point I want to make is this is the agenda that President Erdogan is pushing. And I would argue it's contrary to the fundamental principles of European democracy, because what President Erdogan is trying to do is to splinter the people of the Republic of Cyprus into two peoples in the plural, each with separate rights to self-determination, each with a separate sovereign state, each with separate zones, each with separate areas under its jurisdiction. He's trying to dismantle the idea of democracy. But he's going beyond that. He's trying to dismantle the idea of the rule of law, because it's a basic principle of the post-1945 legal order that it is impossible to create a sovereign entity through the unlawful use of force by one state against another state that gives rise to an occupation. In other words, an occupation of land by a foreign power cannot create a sovereign republic. There may be limited exceptions to that general principle, but that is the general principle. So let's look now behind these rather rambling assertions of President Erdogan at the deep history that underlies his visit to the Turkish-occupied north of the Republic of Cyprus and the plans that seem to be afoot in the Turkish-occupied city of Famagusta. The starting point as far as the Ottoman relationship with the island of Cyprus is concerned is the Turkish invasion of Cyprus in 1570 that eventually resulted in the downfall of the city of Nicosia. But the Ottoman conquest of the island of Cyprus was not completed until the fall of Famagusta in August 1571. I'll read to you what Harry Luke wrote in his classic book, Cyprus Under the Turks, 1571 to 1878. Our story begins with Bragadino's surrender of Famagusta on the 6th of August 1571, date on which the Venetians in Cyprus ceased all further opposition to the Turkish army of invasion. And he added, it's been the fate of Cyprus almost throughout its long history to be governed by rulers differing in race and religion from the bulk of its inhabitants. Up to the time of the Turkish conquest, the native population, except for the small Latin, Maronite, Coptic, Jacobite, and Armenian colonies, was Greek in religion and in language. So what the Ottoman invasion and subsequent conquest of the island of Cyprus in 1571 demonstrated was, back then, the idea of conquering territory was acceptable under the primitive form of international law that existed back then. But what it also highlighted was that the Ottoman Turkish Empire expanded through the concept of the conquest that was actually built into much of the culture and the psyche and the ideology of the Ottoman Turks. So the conquest of 1571 resulted in the Ottoman conquerors treating the island of Cyprus as if it was their own. And this resulted in, for example, the de-Christianization of the Church of St. Nicholas, the cathedral rather of St. Nicholas in Famagusta. I'll return to that in a moment or two. But Harry Luke writes something else in his book, which is rather interesting. I just want to read this to you. After the capture of Famagusta by the Turks in 1571, this celebrated fortress, even now one of the finest examples of medieval military architecture that survived, fell rapidly from its previous splendor. So Famagusta was really considered to be a fortress. It had a port as well as these medieval ramparts and other military walls. The point is that Famagusta was a military stronghold, and it was perceived to be a military stronghold by the invading Ottoman Turks. And it had a port, the largest port on the island. Harry Luke's observations tally, in a sense, with what William Shakespeare spotted when he wrote Othello, which was largely based in Cyprus, in the year 1603. I mean, William Shakespeare has the first senator in the play Othello speaking of the importance of Cyprus to the Turk and the belief that it, that is to say Cyprus, more concerns the Turk than Rhodes. So you have here The play Othello, which is often associated with the city of Famagusta, laying bare this perception, at least in the eyes of Shakespeare, that Cyprus is more important to the Turk than Rhodes. And history has borne out that assumption, because the Rhodes is now part of Greece, whereas much of the Republic of Cyprus is under Turkish occupation. So if we just go back to this this idea of the Republic of Famagusta as a fortress, the British consular agent in Cyprus in 1843 used that very phrase in a report to the new consul in Larnaca. Harry Luke quotes this consular agent's report of the 20th of November 1843, in which he says that the city of Famagusta is the principal fortress of the island of Cyprus and of the present Ottoman dominions, notwithstanding its neglected condition and its partial abandonment. Its harbour, the only one, is that at the time is the best of the 36 anchorages on the coasts of the said island, although the harbour at Famagusta is choked with mud and ill-kept. There's a photograph, a more modern photograph of the harbour on the slide that you can see. Why am I making these points? I'm making these points that what we saw in relation to Turkish-occupied Famagusta on the 20th of July 2021 cannot be properly understood unless one understands the historic status of Famagusta as A, the principal fortress in the island of Cyprus, to quote this report from 1843, and B, the historic status of Famagusta as the site of the largest port on the island of Cyprus. Now, in the 21st century, Limassol has a very big port. Larnaca has a smaller port, and Famagusta port is not the only one on the territory of the Republic of Cyprus. It's actually now in the Turkish-occupied part, of course. The point I'm making is that in the Ottoman Turkish psyche and in military history more broadly, Famagusta is associated with the military through, for example, the fortifications that you're seeing on the screen there, and it's associated with naval power through the port and commercial sea power as well. Now, during the Ottoman epoch, which ran from 1571 until 1878, Famagusta most obviously formed part of the then unpartitioned island Cyprus. The British came along in 1878 and they annexed the island, having initially administered it with Turkish consent. They annexed the island in 1914. And of course, the whole history of Cyprus under the British epoch was a struggle to ensure that A, self-determination didn't prevail, and B, majoritarian democracy didn't prevail. And I'll just pause here to remind everybody that under the 1946 census, 78.2% of the population declared itself as Greek Orthodox, was the label used at the time. 17.5% of the population declared itself as Muslim Turkish, the label used at the time. 4.3% declared itself as attaching to another religion. So well, I'm going to the history here, but the British epoch was designed to prevent any application of unitary self-determination or majoritarian democracy, because that would have resulted in Cyprus forming part of the then a kingdom of Greece. And therefore the British, with Turkish backing, started pushing the idea that there were two communities in the island of Cyprus. What was originally called the community of non-Muslims on the one hand and the community of Muslims on the other. And those labels were changed in the 50s. So the non-Muslim community became the Greek community and the Muslim community became the Turkish community. And on the screen there you have the leaders of the two communities in the late 1950s, Archbishop Klearchos on the Greek side and the Dr. Küçük on the Turkish side. Let's go back to Famagusta. 1960, the island of Cyprus was partitioned upon the establishment of the Republic of Cyprus, subject to the retention of two sovereign base areas, or two remnants of the crown colony of Cyprus under continuing British sovereignty. Now look where Amorphostos is how Famagusta is pronounced in Greek. Look where Famagusta ended up being located. It ended up being located next to one of the two portions of the crown colony of Cyprus that the United Kingdom retained. It was also, so, and what is Indikalia? Well, Indikalia is a major army camp, but to the northeast of Dikalia, in that little strip of white that seems to be flying off Dikalia, there is the Agios Nikolaos military base, which is an intelligence gathering centre and has been for many decades. And the port in the 60s, in the 50s and the 60s, that was servicing that military infrastructure at Dikalia and Agios Nikolaos was the port of Famagusta. We're talking about the pre-1974 era. So the strategic importance of that part of Cyprus was not only associated with the port of Famagusta, it was also associated with the intelligence gathering centre of Agios Nikolaos, and to a lesser extent, perhaps, the army cantonments at Dikalia. For our purposes, in the pre-1974 period, Famagusta fell within the territory of the then new Republic of Cyprus. Now, I won't go to the detail of the constitution, but what I will do is take you to the census results from 1960. And these demonstrated that in the town of Famagusta, as it was called, including its suburbs, the total population was 34,774. In 1960, of those 34,700 or so, 24,506 were declared as Greeks. You hear the labels have changed. Back in 46, the different labels used. In this census, the label Greeks was used, 24,500 or so. 6,120 declared themselves as Greeks. Surprisingly large number, 3,663 declared themselves as British, 152 Armenians, and so on. So those numbers broadly tallied the overall demographic makeup in the then, well, it was the new Republic of Cyprus, the then new Republic of Cyprus. Those were broadly speaking the percentages. The majority were by and large Greek. The largest minority was Turkish, and there was a sprinkling above a minority. So Famagusta was largely populated by citizens of the Republic of Cyprus of Greek heritage. That's back in 1960, according to the census results. Now, the constitution of the Republic of Cyprus, it was established along essentially Ottoman constitutional lines, with two communities that reflected the Ottoman idea that you had Muslims separated from non-Muslims. I'm not going to go into that today. I've done it on other occasions. But for our purposes, that segregationist, separatist doctrine that influenced the creation of the Constitution of the Republic of Cyprus affected Famagusta as well, because in the Constitution of 1960, there's a rather preposterous provision, which was never implemented, under which this is Article 1731, separate municipalities shall be created in the 5 largest towns of the Republic, that is to say, Nicosia, Limassol, Famagusta, Larnaca, and Paphos, by the Turkish inhabitants thereof. So it's for those of us steeped in liberal democracy, this is mad. The idea that you do not have one integrated town council covering the whole of the territory under the town council's jurisdiction. No, what was envisaged by the Constitution was that there would be 2 town councils, one essentially for the Greeks and one essentially for the Turks. And that was a reflection of the segregationist culture that Turkey was pushing, and which influenced the drafting of the Constitution. That never came to pass, and that was actually one of the causes of the tension that resulted in the constitutional and intercommunal clashes of 1963 and 1964. Now, I found this map from the US Library of Congress. It's a US Army map from the 1960s. And it shows you this entity called Varosha, which is, as far as my research is shown, not a legal entity as such. It's not one of the wards, as I understand, it's not one of the wards of the city of Famagusta, which is so divided into various wards, or districts or parishes. None of those. It's just a colloquial expression that nonetheless finds itself on various maps. And here is the US Army map, where you can see Varosha portrayed as the southern suburb of the city of Famagusta. Now I'm running out of time, so I'll just race on towards 1974. It will explain the backdrop to what President Erdogan was up to when he was saying what he was saying on the 20th of July 2021. The Turkish strategy from the late 1950s onwards was aimed at establishing a Turkish foothold in the north of the Republic of Cyprus. That was not viable during the late 1950s, largely because the Eisenhower administration was having none of it. And the Eisenhower administration didn't want the island of Cyprus to be partitioned in the way that some British ministers and officials were contemplating in 1956, and as the Turkish government started to contemplate seriously and indeed to call for in 1956 and later on in 1957. What you see on the right of the screen is the front cover of the book published by Dr. Fazıl Küçük, who ended up becoming the first president of the Republic of Cyprus. In 1957, as you can see from the front cover, he was calling for a permanent solution to the so-called Cyprus question by means of a partition. And you can see here from this map that Famagusta was within the mindset of Turkish strategy from 1957 onwards. And therefore, once you see that map, it comes a little surprise that Famagusta fell under Turkish occupation in 1974. But there's further evidence to suggest that Famagusta was in the eyes of the Turks from before 1974. One only has to look at the report of Dr. Gallo Plaza, the United Nations mediator, dated 26th of March 1965. Let me just read to you what he wrote, having consulted Turkey, other international actors, the Republic of Cyprus, and the leadership of the Turkish community in the Republic of Cyprus. This is what Gallo Plaza recorded in paragraph 73 of his report. The proposal of the leadership of the Turkish community of the Republic of Cyprus envisaged a compulsory exchange of population in order to bring about a state of affairs in which each community would occupy a separate part of the island. The dividing line was in fact suggested to run from the village of Yalya on the northwest coast through the towns of Nicosia in the center and Famagusta in the east. The zone lying north of this line was claimed by the Turkish Cypriot community. It's said to have an area of about 1,084 square miles, or 38% of the total area of the Republic. So by 1965, Turkish strategy had switched slightly from the image that you see on the screen there. They weren't quite demanding half of the island. They were now pushing for 38% of the island, from the northwest coast to Nicosia, and from Nicosia down to Famagusta. I mean, his report, Gallo Plaza, went one step further, and he clarified that according to the submissions that he'd received, the Turkish Cypriots envisage a federal system within which there would exist autonomous Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot states, the conditions for whose existence would be created by the geographical separation which they insistently demand of the two communities. Now, here you have the origins of what President Erdogan said on the 20th of July 2021, when he was claiming that there were two peoples and two states on the island of Cyprus. I mean, that's his pipe dream. He wants there to be international recognition of two states. But the idea of two states in the Republic or the island of Cyprus has its origins in Turkish strategy in the late 1950s. And here we have, in the Gallo Plaza report from the United Nations in 1965, cast iron evidence, among other pieces of cast iron evidence we have to show that Turkey was pressing for and the Turkish strategy was pressing for the formation and recognition of two separate states under a federal, weak, fragile federal umbrella, yes, but they were calling for states from 1965. This is way before the coup instigated in Nicosia in 1974 and the two subsequent Turkish invasions. But Galip Plaza does something else. He issues a comment to refer to what the Turks were proposing back then as federation is to oversimplify the matter. What is involved is not merely to establish a federal form of government, but also to secure the geographical separation of the two communities. Because back then, Greek citizens of the Republic of Cyprus were scattered all over the Republic of Cyprus. Turkish citizens of the Republic were scattered all over the Republic. So what Turkey needed to do, or what Turkey wanted, was there to be essentially ethnic cleansing, so that Turks who were living in the wrong place would be sent to the north, Greeks living in the wrong place, in inverted commas, would be forcibly moved to the south. And that's essentially what happened in 1974. There was a coup, an illegal criminal coup in Nicosia. It was instigated by the junta on its last legs in Athens. Turkey purported to exercise its right to take action under Article 4 of the Treaty of Guarantee in 1960. It took action in the form of an invasion, and even though the coup was based, or rather largely focused on Nicosia, Turkey started bombing Famagusta, including ostensibly civilian infrastructures such as the hospital at Famagusta and the Salivania Tower Hotel. Now, I can't say definitively what was going on in both the hospital and the hotel, because there's been no international criminal tribunal established for the Republic of Cyprus. So we've not had any criminal investigations to find out whether these were war crimes or crimes against humanity. So I can't comment on whether they are war crimes or crimes against humanity. What I can say is that the so-called international community decided to close its eyes and close its ears and not instigate any Nuremberg-style or Hague-style international criminal justice process. So Famagusta bore the brunt of heavy bombing during the first Turkish invasion, which began on the 20th of July 1974, and effectively came to an end with a ceasefire on the 22nd of July 1974. And within a day or two of the ceasefire, the junta in Athens had collapsed, and so did its coupists collaborationist regime in Nicosia. There was a semblance of restoration of constitutional order in both Athens and Nicosia. Turkey, however, embarked upon fresh military operations after the 22nd of July and most seriously on the 14th of August 1974. And it was at this moment, on the 14th of August 1974, that Turkey ended up occupying, having established a bridgehead after the first invasion. They ended up occupying 36 or 37% of the territory of the Republic of Cyprus, and 58% of the, or 57% rather, of the coastline of the Republic of Cyprus. And the whole of the town of Famagusta ended up falling into the Turkish-occupied area. And ethnic cleansing took place in the occupied area. There was overt ethnic cleansing in places like Kyriakides, where people were forcibly removed from their homes at the barrel of a gun. And there was indirect ethnic cleansing in places like Famagusta. And I should declare the village of my late paternal grandfather, which is Lissi, not very far from Famagusta, where people fled from their homes in fear of the invading and approaching Turkish occupation forces. So Famagusta in 1974 ended up as part of the Turkish-occupied north of the Republic of Cyprus, having been ethnically cleansed, and therefore the port, the commercial jewel in the crown of the Republic of Cyprus, fell under Turkish occupation as well. And what happened in the aftermath of the invasion two Turkish invasions was a process that had taken place to some extent after 1571. It was a process of de-Christianization. Christian churches ceased to be functioning Christian churches. Christian cemeteries ceased to be functioning Christian cemeteries. And in many cases, some churches were forcibly Islamized, arbitrarily Islamized, and turned into mosques. That's in the Turkish-occupied north. Now, I just want to go back before I finish. If you just have a look at this, this is a map of the sovereign base published by the Sovereign Base Series. The town of Famagusta is pretty large, but this Varosha part, this phrase Varosha, this name, it only really applies to one part of the southern suburb of Famagusta. Indeed, it's the coastal suburb of Famagusta. It doesn't exist as a parish or as a ward or as a council in its own right, municipality in its own right, Varosha. It's a label that has entered into the lexicon. And what has happened since 1974 is many people, including many forcibly displaced Famagustas, have sort of focused all their energies on this place called Varosha and overlooked the fact that the whole of Famagusta is occupied by Turkey, and the whole of Famagusta is occupied by Turkey as part of a much broader strategy of occupation. And I just want to finish in the last few minutes just by drawing your attention to a number of Security Council resolutions. Now, I'm going to stress here what Turkey did by invading, occupying, and ethnically cleansing the Republic of Cyprus appears to have been in clear breach of the United Nations Charter, the Geneva Conventions of 1949, and a host of other treaties and principles of international law. The United Nations has issued a string of toothless resolutions, not under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, but nonetheless, these resolutions exist as a matter of fact and as a matter of law. Resolution 550 of 1984 is important for three reasons. Firstly, it's a resolution that reinforces the illegality of the so-called Turkish Republic of Cyprus. Secondly, it's the only resolution that expressly recognizes that there is an occupied part of the Republic of Cyprus. And thirdly, Resolution 550 expresses the deep concern of the Security Council about the then recent threats for settlement of Varosha by people other than its inhabitants. Resolution 550 went on to consider attempts to settle any part of Varosha by people other than its inhabitants as inadmissible, and it calls for the transfer of that area not to the Republic of Cyprus, but as an interim measure to the administration of the United Nations. And this has acted like a, if I can use an expression, a bowl of food to a cat, to a dog. So many Famagustans have been, I would suggest, sidetracked by this reference to Varosha, and they've channeled so much of their efforts in trying to ensure compliance by Turkey with this resolution in relation to Varosha that they've lost sight of the fact that this resolution does not call for the return of Famagusta to the Republic of Cyprus. It doesn't call for the return of any other part of the occupied north to the Republic of Cyprus. And it's essentially a recognition that Varosha is to be treated as a special case. It doesn't even define what Varosha means, I have to say, this resolution 550. But there it is. That's the resolution that everyone's been talking about. Resolution 649 came next. This was the, well, there were others, but the one I want to just say a word or two on. This is the backdrop to the ill-fated Annan Plan of 2004. And what it did was it was effectively a capitulation by the UN to the bi-communal, bi-zonal and federal demands of Turkey that I've already drawn your attention to in the context of Gallic Plaza. Now, this resolution 649 was the first resolution that was overtly calling for a bi-communal, bi-zonal federation. But it led to the adoption of resolution 750 on the 10th of April 1992 that was a clear acceptance of the Turkish segregationist agenda. In the event of a settlement, the majority of the population in the north will belong to the Turkish community, and the majority of the population in the south belong to the Greek community. And property ownership would reflect that reality. So there was a capitulation to Turkey. This was in the days when the West believed that Turkey was becoming European and democratic, and its destiny was to join the then European Economic Community. These were all dreams that collapsed, with especially in the years since Erdogan came to power. That was the mindset that drove this capitulation to the demands of Turkey. Now, I'm going to come now to Resolution 7899, which is a resolution that is often referred to in the context of Famagusta. It reiterates, to all intents and purposes, what's in Resolution 550 that I've referred to. But what's very, very rarely mentioned in public is something else that Resolution 789 endorses. So let me just say a word or two on this, because it's of critical importance. Paragraph 25, let me start again. The UN Security Council Resolution 789 endorses a report of the UN Secretary General of the 21st of August 1992. And if you read that report that's endorsed by the Security Council, one finds that the proposed Turkish Cypriot federated state in the north of the Republic of Cyprus, rephrase that, the proposed Turkish Cypriot federated state that would come into existence in what is now the north of the Republic of Cyprus would contain some 55% of the island's coastline, the most valuable natural resource of Cyprus. So Resolution 789 that you hear about almost on a daily basis from the Famagustans, which the Famagustans are actually, some Famagustans are actually calling for its implementation without qualification. I've heard so many of them say this. We demand the immediate implementation of Resolution 789 because of what it says about Varosha and how it tallies with Resolution 550, which calls for Varosha to be transferred to UN administration. So here you have the victims of Turkey proclaiming their support for a Resolution 789 that is envisaging 55% of the coastline passing lawfully from the Republic of Cyprus, which is the current sovereign power of that coastline, to the proposed new Turkish Cypriot federated state. Now, if that was ever to come to fruition, this Turkish Cypriot federated state, or whatever it's going to be called, will essentially be a puppet state of Turkey. And Turkey will not only have de facto control of the majority of the coastline, they will also have, through that Turkish Cypriot state that is proposed to come into existence, they would also have indirect legal control of that coastline. And this, I think, is something that the West and the European Union should pause to think about. Do they really want to create a legal Turkish entity in the north of the Republic of Cyprus that may give rise to the death of the Republic of Cyprus and give Turkey indirect legal control of the majority of the coastline? Do they really want to give control of the port of Famagusta legally to Turkey or its proposed Turkish Cypriot federated state, which would be a puppet, to all intents and purposes, of Turkey? These are big questions, and they have to be asked, and I'm asking them through the forum of this commentary. What's most troubling of all, and I'm going to close with this, is that if I can paraphrase one of Churchill's supposed sayings, this is a huge paraphrase. If you offer a crocodile one arm, he's going to bite it and eat it, and he's not going to be satisfied with that one arm. He's going to want the other arm as well. And having invaded and occupied 36 or so % of the Republic of Cyprus, and having now occupied 57% of the coastline, and having got away with it to all intents and purposes because of those toothless UN Security Council resolutions that I've referred to, Turkey is now propagating the myth that the whole of the island of Cyprus belongs to Turkey. That is to say, the whole of the Republic of Cyprus, including the non-Turkish occupied parts, plus the two portions of the crown colony of Cyprus, which are called southern base areas. Turkey is propagating this myth on one Turkish government website after another. Here I just have two examples. One is a map of the Ministry of National Education, that's the top map. And the second map is taken from the General Directorate of Meteorology. That's part of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry. These are just two examples of maps published in the year 2021 that portray the whole of the island of Cyprus as if it's part of Turkey. This should give us cause for concern, because I would suggest it's giving us an insight into the mindset of Turkey. It does not regard itself as satisfied with occupation of 36.2% or whatever the precise percentage is of the Republic. They're not satisfied with 57% of de facto control of the coastline of the Republic. They're not satisfied with the 55% of the coastline that the UN has offered them under Resolution 789. Turkey, it would appear, wants to have control of the whole of the island of Cyprus through one means or another. And I'll close with this final slide. It's an image that was published by the Turkish Ministry of Defense on the 27th of February 2019. The image was used to promote the official Turkish Mavi Vatan doctrine, that's the blue homeland naval and military doctrine that has been pushed by Turkey in recent years in the Eastern Mediterranean. But the reason I'm showing you this image is not only to draw your attention to this new doctrine, relatively new doctrine that Turkey is now propagating. I'm showing you this image to illustrate the militarism that is at the heart of Turkey, to remind you that the Republic of Cyprus has no modern air force, no modern navy, and a fairly weak National Guard, which takes a good deal of support from Greece, but it's a pretty weak army by modern standards. And here you have Turkey with an increasingly militaristic and aggressive outlook that's portrayed quite clearly on this map. But I'm also showing you this image because it, like the other two I showed a minute or two ago, this image of the Ministry of Defense of Turkey shows the whole of the island of Cyprus as if it already is part of Turkey. And it's not just Famagusta, it's every single square inch of the island of Cyprus that is portrayed as if it's part of Turkey. So that brings me to the end of this commentary. If I can just sum up with one thought that I'd like you to take with you. What occurred in Famagusta, or in relation to Famagusta on the 20th of July 2021, when President Erdogan issued those statements that he did, cannot be properly understood unless one goes back into history and understands the culture of conquest that is imprinted into the psyche and the mindset of Turkey. And that is what we should be worried about, this culture of conquest that owes its origins to the Ottoman Turkish imperial epoch. And if President Erdogan is the embodiment of neo-Ottomanism, that culture of conquest is still very much alive in Turkey today.